I'm not a fancy man. I don't have anything expensive. I've never been outside the city walls of Jerusalem. I'm just a simple stable keeper here in town, and I just work hard every day to make sure my family has a roof over their head and food to eat on the table.
One day, when I was helping my father, I was working beside a donkey, and these men came up and started untying it. I wanted to stop them, but I didn't know what to say, and I knew they wouldn't listen to me because I'm a woman, especially a young woman. I went up to them, though, and I said, "Why are you untying our donkey? It belongs to our master." They turned towards me, and I thought they were going to laugh at me or even hit me, but instead they smiled and said, "Our master needs this. We will bring it to you as soon as we're done with it."
I was really puzzled by what my daughter was telling me, and I, for some reason, decided to trust these men and let them take our donkey. But as they were walking away with our donkey, decided to follow them and really wanted us to see what they were talking about, and especially see this man that needed our donkey.
As we started getting closer, we heard shouts of joy, and we started running to see what was going on.
We ran the rest of the way until we came up to the crowd of hundreds of people that were shouting, "Hosanna! Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord! Hosanna in the highest! Hosanna! Blessed is the coming kingdom of our ancestor David! Hosanna!" So I decided to lift my daughter up so that she could catch a glimpse of this man that they were shouting about. And then suddenly the crowds parted, and I couldn't believe my eyes, but there was the man, and he was riding on our donkey into the city. I thought to myself, surely this man is not just the master of these two other men. There must be something special about him. Could he really be the Messiah, God's chosen one, the long-expected one, coming to save our people?
I wish the rest of our family had been there to see it. I know me and my father will be talking about this for a very long time. And they did bring back our donkey.
But we really didn't know what else to expect, what was going to happen to this man. My daughter and I just knew that we were grateful that we were able to be helpful to God's Messiah, God's own Son, and it filled us with great joy.
If you were here with us today, we would give you a palm branch in order to remember our story.
You are not going to believe what just happened here. I mean, look around. See? Money on the floor and feathers. Every year at Passover, we have a lot of visitors, foreigners, and they need local currency, so the money changers set their tables up here, and people come to change their money. And the merchants will set up with the cages for the animals and the birds, and they sell these to the visitors who need them for their sacrifices when they go into the temple over here. Well, this year, you're not going to believe what just happened. Everybody was setting up. It was selling and buying and people all over the place, and it was noisy and exciting. And then this man comes in with his followers, and it was this guy that they say he's a teacher, a carpenter from Nazareth. And a lot of people are talking about him. They say he's even the Messiah. Well, he comes in, and at first he just stands and watches, sees what's going on. And I couldn't believe my eyes, but as I watched him, he was getting angrier and angrier. And the next thing I knew, he grabbed a whip and he was chasing everybody away, all of the merchants, all of the money changers, and he didn't stop until they were gone. Well, then, as he looked around, he thundered and shouted, and he said, "This is my temple is a house of prayer, and you've made it a den of robbers." Well, I didn't know what to think. I'd heard him teach before, and he was always so kind and loving, and I heard he even did some healing. So I don't know why he got so angry. Can you imagine why? What made him so angry? Now, I know that sometimes the merchants and the money changers charge people more than they should, especially during Passover. But nobody's ever said anything about it before, and they take advantage of the foreigners sometimes. But everybody does that. I just don't understand. Maybe you can help me understand. And when you're on your way, I'm going to give you some feathers and some coins to help you remember what happened here at the temple today.
Well, I'll tell you, this has been a very special Passover. I've never had one like this before. It kind of all started out when I was hearing these messages about Jesus, but he was way up in Galilee. And so I decided that I would just go up there and see what this was all about. And I did. And then when I found, they told me where Jesus was, and it was one of those occasions when there's just lots of people around. And so I listened to what he said, and he is a marvelous teacher. I've never heard a person teach with such insight and skill as he did. And then I needed to speak to him, and so I kind of waited until the crowd thinned out. And I went up and talked to him, and I said, well, I just want to tell you how much I appreciate your teaching. It's just marvelous. But I also wanted to mention, I'm from Jerusalem, and I have a house down there that has a nice big room where when you and your disciples come down for the Passover, you can come celebrate in that room. And he said, well, thank you very much. We will take you up on that. We'll be there. So I went back home, and when Passover came, as anticipated, he and his disciples came up to the room. And as they were kind of settling in a little bit, they began to talk to one another about what was going on, and they were thinking this was going to be kind of a special occasion. And they started planning about when Jesus became the leader, the king, what they were going to do to help him out and that kind of thing. And so after a while, he began to talk to him, and he said, you know, one of you all is going to betray me. And they all looked flabbergasted. They couldn't figure out how anyone would betray him. And he said, I'm not going to do it. Surely I'm not. And so they talked to one another about this. And then finally Jesus said, the one that takes this bread and puts it in the dish just like this and eats it, that's the one that's going to betray me. And then one of them, I think it was Judas was his name, he said, you don't think I'm the one, do you? And then he said, you have said so. There was this kind of dull silence. And then they began to talk to one another and didn't say too much. And then right after that, Jesus took off his outer robe and tied a towel around himself, one like this. And he had a bowl with water in it. And he went around to each of the disciples and washed their feet. And they couldn't figure out what was going on. Here their teacher was washing their feet. And finally, when he got around to Peter, Peter said, no, you can't wash my feet. That's not right. You're the head of us. You can't even go around here washing our feet. And then Jesus said, if I can't wash your feet, you really have no part with me. And he said, oh, well, wash me all over. And so they said, no, I don't need to do that. Just your feet. So he went around the room and washed the feet of every last one of those that was there. And then when he finished that, they were kind of mumbling among themselves as he was finishing up. He got it out, put his robe back on, and he said, there's something I need to share with you. And he took up the piece of bread like this, the Passover bread, and he took it and he broke it. And broke it into pieces. And he began to pass it around to the disciples. And he said, "This is my body." And he ate it. And they ate it. And they couldn't figure out, what is he trying to say to us? That this bread is who he is. And that we are all sharing in it. And so then they kind of turned to each other, were talking about this, trying to figure out what this meant. And then he said, I need your attention once more. And he took up the cup. It had the wine in it. And he said, "You all need to drink this. Because when you drink this, you're drinking my life. It's just like my blood that you're drinking, my very life." And with this participation one in another, we are creating a new covenant among yourselves and with God. And they all kind of quiet. They weren't quite sure what to make of this. And then they began talking to each other again. And then, after a while, they sang a hymn, a Passover hymn, and they left and went out to Mount Gethsemane. And here I am after this supper is over, and I'm just amazed on the one hand and very exuberant and trying to figure out what this is all about. Because here he washed their feet, which is about as humbling a thing as you can do. And then he talked about one of them betraying him. And then he came and he took the bread and he said, "As you share in this bread, you're sharing in me." And then he took the cup and he said, "With this cup is like my life. It's like my blood. Drink this." And we are creating a new covenant, a new bond between yourselves, between you and God. And this is a whole new life opening up before you. And they were all puzzled, not quite sure what to make of this. But they've gone out to Gethsemane, and so we're left here with this remnant of this meal. And I'm so glad you came by so I could tell you about it. And I want to give you a little cup to remind you of this time we shared together and of the things that Jesus shared with his disciples and with me. Thank you very much for coming.
I'm so glad to see you. There's been so much going on here. Can you tell me what's happened? Oh, I'm sorry. You don't know what's been going on, do you? Well, gather round and I'll tell you. I was serving at the house where Jesus and his friends were dining. And it was such a fine meal. It's normal that people would want to take a nap after that. So everyone fell asleep, except for me. I was the only one who was awake. And I saw Jesus steal out of the house and go away by himself. And he was followed by 3 of his friends. I didn't think anything of it until I saw the one they called Judas sneak out behind him. And I thought, this can't be good. So I stole away as well and came up here and I hid behind that bush. And you'll never guess what I saw. See the grass down there? That was where Jesus' 3 friends laid down and they went to sleep. Jesus asked them to stay awake, but they couldn't. They let him suffer by himself. They went to sleep. But I wasn't asleep. Oh no,
I saw how Jesus went over there and he knelt down and he started to pray. Oh, and he was praying so hard, and I know he was praying hard because the sweat was pouring off his forehead. He was praying to his Father in heaven, something about a cup that should pass from him because he didn't want to drink from it. I think it meant that something awful was going to happen, and he was afraid of it, like anyone would be. And then you'll never guess what happened. A bright light appeared in front of Jesus, and it was so bright I had to hide my eyes. I couldn't look at it. It must have been an angel from heaven. And then when I could look again, Jesus was still kneeling, but a peace had come over him. I had never seen anyone change so quickly. It was as if all his fears had been taken away from him. Thank goodness, because there was such a commotion happen. A big crowd of soldiers and priests and townspeople were coming up the hill towards us. And at their head was Judas Iscariot. And he went up to Jesus, and he took his hands between his, and he kissed them. What a friend! To betray someone with a kiss of friendship. Now, Jesus' friends awoke at that, and they took out their swords and were ready to fight for his freedom. But Jesus said, "No, put your swords away." And he left with the soldiers. I don't know what's happened, and I'm so wanting to know the rest of the story. Do you think you could go and find out for me and come back and tell me? I can't stand the suspense. And if you were here with me, I would give you some rosemary from the garden to remember the time that Jesus prayed. Bye-bye.
I don't know exactly how to begin to tell you what happened here tonight. A few hours ago, the chief priest and the Jewish police brought a man named Jesus to my husband, the governor, Pontius Pilate. They wanted my husband to charge him with a crime and convict him of death. My husband took Jesus into another room and asked him, "Do you say that you are King of the Jews?" Jesus answered, "That is what you say." So my husband went back out to the priest and the police and said, "I see nothing to convict this man of." So that did not please them. They were angry. And Pontius sent Jesus with the chief priest and the police to Herod, the prince of the Jews in Galilee, because Jesus was from Galilee. Well, pretty soon, he was back in our courtyard. I don't know what happened. Pontius said he didn't know what happened, but there were several prisoners waiting to be sentenced that day and crucified. Many of them were Jewish. Pontius went out to the crowd and said, "I will let one of the prisoners go, since this is Passover." And he thought they would release Jesus because he thought the common people loved him. But they chanted, "Give us Barabbas! Barabbas, a murderer!" So my husband was so frustrated, I heard him say to the crowd, "This man has done nothing wrong, nothing to be sentenced to death. I will have him beaten with whips and then released." I don't know why, but they wanted him crucified. They began to get very angry, and their voices got louder and louder. Pontius kept asking them, "Why? What has he done to deserve death?" But the crowd continued to chant, "Crucify him! Crucify him!" I think the police had bribed them to say that, along with the priest. Poor Pontius sat in his judgment seat with his head in his hands, and he didn't know what to do. I was watching and listening from inside our house, and I was terrified. You see, I had a dream about this man the night before. This man was an innocent man that had done nothing wrong. He had done good for the people, and I did not know why they wanted him to be put to death. Pontius picked up a bowl of water and said, I will have nothing to do with the death of this man. And he washed his hands, and the Jewish people chanted, let his blood be on our hands. And he wiped his hands with this towel, and Jesus was led away by the police to be crucified in the place of Barabbas. Take this towel with you to remember what happened here tonight.
Well, it's shocking what just went on here. It was Friday. Jesus is walking, has been condemned to death. He's walking through the streets, falling down, carrying his cross. We were told to help him carry his cross to the place called Golgotha, the place of the skull. Scary a place it is. They put Jesus there with two thieves, one on one side, one on the other side, people jeering, spitting upon him, yelling at him. Even one of the thieves began to jeer at Jesus and say, if you've saved others, save us. But one of the thieves said to the other thief, what we've done is the reason we're being punished. This man has done nothing. And he said to Jesus, remember me when you get into your kingdom. And Jesus says, this day you shall be with me in paradise. It was a strange statement. About 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the sky began to darken. The earth was rumbling. People began to realize too late that what they had done was wrong. At least some of us did. I was scared. I was standing at a distance. I'm a wealthy man. I'm from the village of Arimathea. I'm a member of the Sanhedrin. The Sanhedrin was involved in condemning Jesus to death, but I didn't agree, but I didn't know what to do. So I sat there with some of his followers, Mary Magdalene, watching what was going on, realizing what a mistake had been made. Even the Roman centurion that was commanding the crucifixion of Jesus said, this man surely was innocent. Other soldiers, though, were making fun. They were gambling over his garments. It was a terrible sight, frightening. And I didn't know what to do because I was part of the Sanhedrin. I'd been somehow involved. I'm a man of some influence. And then it hit me that Jesus was a poor man. I remember one time him saying he didn't even have a place for his head to lay down. And I remember in our culture, we make tombs out of caves, and we carve out the cave. And my family, I had purchased a cave and had it carved out for when members of my family would die, that they could be buried there. And I thought, Jesus has no place to be buried. It was frightening, it was scary. But I decided to go to the Roman governor, Pontius Pilate, and ask him for the body of Jesus. Pilate was shocked. He said, we only crucified him this morning at 9 o'clock. People sometimes hang for a day or two. Surely he's not dead yet. And so he ordered one of his soldiers to go and check to see whether Jesus was in fact dead. And so I was told. I wasn't there. They jammed a spear through his ribs. And then the soldier came back and said to Pontius Pilate, yes, Jesus is dead. So I took his body. We took it to my tomb. It was almost Sabbath, and in our culture, once sunset comes, you don't touch a dead body. And so normally we prepare a body, we wash a body, we anoint it with perfumes, but we didn't have time. We very quickly put him inside of that cave. And then we were afraid wild animals would come, and so we took a large stone and we rolled it in front of the tomb, and then rumors started flowing that maybe Jesus might, someone might steal his body and claim that he had risen from the dead. So what happened is Pontius Pilate ordered soldiers to be stationed there in front of the tomb. I left. Mary Magdalene left. We agreed that they would come back on Sabbath, on the morning after Sabbath, and prepare the body. It was the saddest day of my life. I've been sitting here. I carved out a little cross to remind me of Jesus. Would you like one?
This is where it happened. They killed Jesus. I loved him so much. It was so painful. You would have loved him too if you'd known him. He was the kind of person that showed you how to love. He even cared about the people who were poor, like the widows and the orphans. He taught us about how to love one another and how to care for those who were unable to defend themselves and take care of themselves, like the hungry and the thirsty and the sick and those in prison. And he taught us all about God and how to just love one another. And he allowed us to love him too. But they killed him. I couldn't come here that very morning because it was the Sabbath, and you're not allowed to do work or walk very far on the Sabbath. So I came here as early as I could the next morning. It was still dark and the tomb was empty. There was no body inside. I didn't know what had happened. I was terrified that had the Romans taken him or the religious leaders? I didn't know. And so I ran and I found the disciples where they were hiding, and I told them what had happened, and John and Peter leapt up and came with me. They saw that the tomb was empty too, and the white cloth we'd wrapped his body in was just laying there empty. They left, and I just stayed weeping. It was so sad. I went back in for one last look, and you won't believe what I saw. There were 2 men robed in white, and they saw that I was crying, and I turned around, and there was another man. I thought maybe the gardener, and they said, "Why are you crying?" And I said, "They've taken my Lord. They've taken his body. What happened? Do you know where it is?" And he said, "Mary." And I recognized his voice and realized it was Jesus. He was alive. I couldn't believe it. I ran to find the disciples and I told them all about it. I don't think they believed me. Do you believe me? Please take this stone as a way to remember that day that the stone had been rolled away.